When you see someone, Andrew Tate, speak up against governments and try and shed light and wake people up and won't shut up, then and they try and cancel you, and then okay, now they're going to try and put you in prison, and then they don't go to prison and the whole case gets thrown out, you start to think, okay, so maybe it's true. Maybe what he's saying isn't so far-fetched, because why would they go after him so much?
We are the highest taxed nation in the world, and somebody needs to do something about that because of your comments about wealth. You know, it could be seen that they're gathering money for what, and they're taxing us unnecessarily. I think too many people sit on the sidelines just living their lives in their bubble.
Welcome back to Two Generations, One Mic, where no topic is off limits.
And no opinion is left unsaid. My name is Michelle Blitzovs, and I am a Generation X.
And I'm Joel Blitzovs, a Gen Z.
And we've been discussing around our kitchen table, which is kind of what this podcast is all about, the sorts of conversations that we as mother and son have,
Yes.
and what's happening around in the world around us. And we've been discussing this concept of the Matrix. Now,
Yes,
when
that's
you
right.
said that to me, I immediately thought of Keanu Reeves. My favourite movie is The Matrix. But you've got this kind of different perception of it, something that I as a Gen X had not heard of. So maybe I'm following different social media channels to you, but
Yes, well, I think
explain
it is.
Matrix to us, Joel.
I think it's a concept that a lot of people are starting to discover now, especially with a lot of things going on in the world, especially in America right now with the release of the Epstein files. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, or I have been talking about it with you and with Dad. And the concept of the Matrix is really just a big distraction put on by the people in charge or the leadership, if I was to put it plainly. So what does that look like in our lives?
And so, you know, the concept of the Matrix comes from that movie, right?
Yeah.
Where Neo is kind of living this sort of dream life, and it's not his real life. He's kind of stuck in this system, and it's all about how he breaks out and kind of frees anybody who wants to be freed from that system, you know, blue pill, red pill.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the concept behind it. So explain to us what this Matrix sort of looks like today in the real world.
Well, today in the real world, I think it's really, I guess, talked about with your lifestyle and the way life is set up for people. So we're all regular people working our 9-to-5 jobs. We've all taught all our lives to work. A lot of your generation has followed that system of working until they're 60, 70 years old, their whole life, trying to keep their head above water, have kids, have the Australian dream or American dream, owning a home and things like that. And then we've got things like entertainment, and it all could essentially just be a similar life that everyone seems to live, and we all go on about our days, and it seems to be a bit of a distraction to what's really going on in the real world. Because when we have all these things like needing to make money, we have all these TV shows, we have entertainment with sports, what are we really paying attention to? And when it's been thrown in front of our face, such as these Epstein files being released, showing that wealth, and there's a lot of people in power, and a lot of people in power is very corrupted, especially in America, now a lot of people are starting to think and actually question everything. I think in this life, as you go from school to as an adult, you're kind of just taught that the government's in control. We can trust the government. We can trust everyone. You just kind of go on about your days. I don't think anyone really questions a lot of things. But I think with recent events, especially with these files being released, literally showing us several names of famous people, even the President Donald Trump, and things like that are being released in these files. Now everyone's looking into it as it's public knowledge. And now everyone's starting to think, if this has been the case and this has been hidden for so long, and now it's being revealed, what else has been hidden? What else have they been hiding? And they're paying taxes to these people. They're paying taxes to these governments. So people start to question. And I think the whole idea of the Matrix is to ensure that people do not question, that they're so distracted and caught up in their own lives that they do not question these things, and they can kind of just slip through the cracks, so it all gets unseen. And that's essentially...
I think throughout history, because this really comes down to, leadership and trust and corruption, and what we as regular people who live in suburbia, how much attention are we paying to what's going on in the world around us? And we read our newspapers, we watch on television, we get little clips of things, and we say, that's terrible. And then we just go about our daily life. And I think what you're challenged with at your age is, what do you believe? What don't you believe? What are you involved in? Where are you not involved? We kind of go to school, we grow up, we get a job, we get married, we have our 2.5 kids and a dog, live in suburbia, and then we retire, and then we die, right? The end. And most of us, in fact, the majority of the population lives that way and has forever. Some people in our communities rise to a level of leadership. Some do it very honestly, and some do it a little more corruptly, as is evidence. And I'm talking about countries around the world. It's always been this way from back in the very beginning. And the question now that I think you're asking is, what do you do about it? Do you do anything about it? Some years ago, probably about 15 years ago now, actually, I got involved in politics myself, because we lived in a suburb or in an area that was corrupt. In fact, the local council had been thrown out because of corruption. And I would go to business events and local events, and I would talk about it, and everybody would go, oh, yeah, it's just always been like that. That's just the way it is in this place. It's just always like that here. I'm like, well, why doesn't anybody stand up and do something about it? And that's why I got involved and ultimately became a local councillor, because I wanted to make a difference and make change in the world. And even now in my job, what I'm trying to do is make change for a profession. And so I think some people do stand up, whether that's publicly, on social or on the media or in politics. Some people do try to stand up. And I think that you're being challenged now. I was in my late 30s before I became aware of kind of what was going on in the world around me. Until then, I just happily lived my life, right, in the matrix.
Yeah. Well, I think 100% people see all this corruption and see all these bad things going on. And because we have social media, I think that brings a lot of light to it, because it's hard to cover up all these things on social media when so many people can post about it and talk about it. But talking about it in the comments, complaining about it on Twitter, doesn't necessarily do anything. And why can't we do anything about it? Well, you can see there's a trend of the people who can get away with corruption and can make these big influences is they have wealth. Like, that's just a matter of the fact, is wealth is a good resource. And that is why I don't think governments want people to get wealthy. You call it conspiracy, I guess, but if people get wealthy, then they have time. If they have time to think, then they start to become aware. Now, not everyone who has wealth is going to speak about things they find. There's plenty of wealthy people that just, stay hidden, they stay off social media, they live their lives, enjoy their lives, that's fine. But I think the government would be scared of the ones who do decide to speak out. And you can see this through evidence of people who have. And one name, and this is when I started to really think, okay, clearly there are higher powers, clearly there are people who can control media and control influence. And that person, for me, was Andrew Tate. For those who don't know, he, in 2022 or during COVID, he was a big name, and he was saying a lot of things about COVID and how, I'm not saying this, but he said he was basically making the claim that COVID was planted, it was made and created and put out there by government, and they wanted to exercise control, etc. And he was getting a lot of movement with this. And the reason, and like he has wealth, he's a very wealthy man, so he can say these things. He has the time to say these things, think about these things, and he, money buys you good lawyers as well. So, wealth, if you have wealth, I think the government's a lot more scared of you because you have that resource and you're less likely to be bought out as well. So he was going on about this, and then he got all these criminal charges thrown at him. So he had like 11 charges thrown at him about trafficking, all this nonsense, I believe, because he's never been convicted. It's been years since he's been thrown in jail. He got thrown in a Romanian prison, and they weren't told anything. They raided his house, took him to prison. They don't know what's going on. They had heaps of charges, and he's yet to be convicted of anything. They had witnesses who were fabricated because his case didn't even go to trial because the guy read the case and threw it out because it was rubbish. So when you see someone, and he's not in the files either, he's clean as a whistle. So when you see someone speak up against governments and try and shed light and wake people up, as he calls it, because this whole idea of the Matrix, again, I got from his influence. When someone does that and has influence and won't shut up, and they try and cancel you, and then, okay, now they're going to try and put you in prison, and then they don't go to prison, and the whole case gets thrown out, and they're still trying to put him in prison, but they can't. And you start to think, okay, so maybe it's true. Maybe what he's saying isn't so far-fetched, because why would they go after him so much? I can't remember what he said, but they saw him as a national security threat because he had so much influence on young men. He would encourage them to go to the gym, and he would encourage them to get wealthy, because if you have wealth, you have the resource, and then you can actually fight this war. And I think the more people that get wealthy, the more chance there's going to be more Andrew Tates. If there's more Andrew Tates, that's not a good thing. So that's why I believe this whole system is set up with these crazy taxes, these crazy cost of living, because they don't want people to become wealthy. They don't want people to have the resources. They don't want people to wake up. They don't want people to think. Because if we had 10,000, 100,000 people all rallied behind this idea, then maybe they could get overthrown or great influence could happen. So I think the whole system is set up. They don't want people to think. They just want people to work. And that's why in school, they don't teach you how to think. They just teach you how to memorize things. And they don't want people like the Andrew Tates.
Well, and there's others, of course. Snowden was one of those, whistleblower. There's been various whistleblowers. I mean, here, even in Australia, we've had various whistleblowers and people that try to stand up. And, politics aside, some might argue that Pauline Hanson fits in that category, Clive Palmer, Gina Rinehart, those that have had, well, I'm not putting Pauline in that category, but certainly Clive Palmer tried to start his own political party. Twice he's had a go at that just to shake things up and, affect the status quo, whether you believe him or not, his approach. And I don't know Andrew Tate. I haven't researched any of that as you have. I think, we go about in our lives, we're on the other side of the planet to what often goes on in the US. But what happens in the US often impacts us here.
Yeah.
As we saw even in our own last federal election, there was an influence there. And so, what does that mean for us? What should we as Aussies, be doing about this? What are you encouraging other young people like yourself to be thinking about when it comes to what they see on social or what they hear in the news or what the government tries to put on them? You're not suggesting we break the law.
No,
I don't think.
Of course not.
I'm just checking.
Look, I genuinely don't think. I think the sad reality is that if to say all this was true, I feel a sense of it's too late. Even if everyone woke up, and because more dark will come to light with these files. There's still heaps of redactions in it. I'm sure more things will come out, and it'll get even crazier. But if no one gets locked up or no one gets charged because of these files, then people are just going to lose hope in the justice system anyway. But as civilians, like what can you really do? The governments of the world who have all this power and wealth, like what can you really do?
So
So
you're suggesting, and one of the challenges that I think you're facing, you're in a bit of a moral dilemma right now as a young person. You know, thinking about kind of what's ahead, you've kind of lost trust, I guess, in the government, in leaders that are over us. How do you get? I mean, and you know, we're recording this on a week that there's been chaos in Canberra in our own parliament this week. Not so much parliament, but one of our parties, two of our parties are probably, you know, they've
mm,
had a leadership challenge and all that sort of stuff. Do you care? Have you been following any of that? Is that, have you lost trust completely in the government and in what they say, that you just don't pay attention to that anymore? And then what does that mean for you when it comes around to voting time? With the next election, we don't have an election in our state for a while, but there's a few states that are going to have state elections this year. People are going to have to get up and vote. What's your words of advice to them about that?
well, my honest, of course, I'm going to be honest with Australian politics. I'm not as up to date on, to be honest. There's a lot of commotion around everything going on in America right now and the Western world. Of course, they're a massive superpower, so I think they'd have influence on our country as well. When it comes to voting time, I do genuinely want to do some more research. I have seen some things that I definitely agree with from like Pauline Hanson and things like that, and I think she is growing a lot of popularity, especially in the youth, because she says things that I haven't heard any politicians really say boldly, especially after the Bondi shooting. So I do want to do more research into that. I'm definitely not voting for Labor. Um, and what to do? Well, for me, this is when I break into another matrix. I feel like there is, which I'm a Christian and I believe there's a spiritual matrix in a sense, you could say as well, where we live in a world of sin. We live in a world of corruption. And the only hope that I have is not in government. It's not even in myself. Yes, I believe in myself. And I'm going to try my best to look. This is the hand we're dealt. If we're dealt with high taxes and hard cost of living and expensive housing, a lot of people are dealt way worse hands than I am.
Mm.
I'm still living in a blessed country. So I'm going to do my absolute best with that. And I'm going to navigate and try and do multiple businesses or whatever to try and provide for the family that I'm going to have. So I'm going to take the cards I'm dealt and I'm just going to work hard. Simple as that. But on the other side of things of, you know, where does my hope come from, or will justice ever come from any of this? Well, my trust is in God. And I think when you're a non-believer, and I feel like there's just this blindfold of sin, and the world is full of it. It promotes it. We see it in the higher powers. Um, it promotes it in TV. It promotes it in music. It promotes lust. It promotes drugs. It promotes being all about yourself. It promotes being selfish. It promotes put yourself first before anyone else. These are all the things it promotes. And the reason why the world is the reason why the world is the way it is today is because of sin. That is the driving factor. So when you wake up, like, I think the only hope really is Jesus and God. And I do believe that he is ultimately in control of everything. And there will be a day where he comes, and there will be a day where all these people doing all these terrible things, justice will be served to them and they will be conquered. So I'm not going to encourage to let's start a revolution, let's overthrow the government, let's all put our money together and do this and that, because I don't think that's going to get anywhere. Because history repeats itself. Like, everyone who gets into power in like throughout history is corrupt and evil. That's what happens because of sin. So the only answer, I think, and I think people will start to realize this, I think as corruption gets higher and worse things happen, I think, or I hope and believe that more people will turn to Christ. Because if you really think about it, what can we do? Well, not much. All we can really do is put our hope in him
Mm.
that he will come back and these people will get served justice by his hand. And if I think Christians, just believers in Christ, are the demographic that the government would be scared of and is scared of, because we get our authority from Jesus. We can't be bought out. So, yeah, I guess that's where, when I look at all this and I read all this, and yes, I talk about it, yes, I debate things with people and whatnot, but at the end of the day, I feel peace because for me personally, my hope is in Jesus. I know that justice will be served for those people. I know that I believe he'll come back and all that will be sorted. So what do I do right now? I'm just going to focus on what he's called me to do, which is provide for my family, try and influence people to have this same hope. Because if I didn't know Jesus and I didn't know God, then I think I'd be extremely stressed, knowing about all the stuff going on in the US. And I'm sure if I looked into our own politics in Australia, I'm sure I'd be stressed as well. So that's what I would encourage people, is to research the Bible and find peace within that.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, across history, this has been the case. What we're experiencing now is not any different. And, you mentioned the Bible. Of course, we know there's a story of Noah where God actually flooded the earth because the people were so corrupt and things were just so bad that God was going to wipe everybody out. And, there is literal history and evidence of that flood that can be found. So whether you believe it or not, I certainly do, you do. We believe the Bible and we believe God. So, there has been history of corruption and poor governments and difficult situations. Every country has stories of bad leaders. We also have stories of good leaders. We have, I do genuinely think that most people get into politics for the right reason, similar to what I did. They want to make a change in the local area, not a, I think dissing any of those people. I think the bureaucracy and government, and it kind of follows a process, and we use the Westminster system here because we copied England. The US has a different system, the UK has a different system, but there's certainly a lot of unrest, and I don't know if it's more than we've ever had before in our world across governments, but there does seem to be quite a lot of unrest.
I actually saw a post on Instagram just before we started this that said the world uncertainty rating, whatever that is the highest it's ever been.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And look, and I don't know if that's the case. Obviously, I've only ever lived in this era.
Yeah.
It's certainly more uncertain than I've ever seen it in my nearly 55 years of living on this planet. But I think, what do we do? I mean, when this is not a doom and gloom podcast, this is us sharing our thoughts and what we think and the way that we move forward with the knowledge that we've got. I think that all we can do is do our part. I think the vote that we get to have in this country is unique. We should not waste it. So whether you've got a state election, a local election, a federal election coming your way, you do need to know who the parties are, and you do need to know who the people standing in your area are, and you do need to vote for them, and you need to not be afraid to write to them. If you're seeing something going on in your local area that you don't agree with, then you should stand up. Not necessarily on social media, but write to the people who do have the seeming power and make your voice heard. I do a lot of advocacy. I do go to Canberra. I meet with politicians. I share with ministers. I share with government agencies things that I think need to be changed in this world. And all we can do is put our view forward. And I think that's important. I think too many people sit on the sidelines just living their lives in their bubble. And I think what we're saying today through this conversation about the matrix is that there is a system that we all have to live by. We do have to abide by the laws of our country. But if we see something that we think is not right, it's up to us to speak up. And I think I'm pleased that you're seeing this at a young age. You know, I was much older than you when I sort of became aware of this stuff. So I'm glad that you're seeing it now, and I hope that you'll speak up more about it and, you know, take notice in our own country as well as, you know, what's happening around the world. But I agree with you that, you know, we're people of faith and our hope is in God. And I don't know how people can live without God. Like, that's where my hope is. That's where my trust is. I think it would be a miserable life if you only had the government to rest upon. And so I think, you know, I'm really pleased that we have God and that we have faith. And there are scriptures that we can rest upon it. And some of those scriptures say that God decides who's in power. And whether we voted for them or not, every election day, every election night, you know, I'm praying that God will put the people in power that he wants for this season in time. And I believe that we have the government that we chose. So people who complain about a government, and I actually happen to think that the Albanese government is not doing a terrible job. There are some things that are quite good. There are some things that I wholeheartedly disagree with. We are the highest taxed nation in the world, and somebody needs to do something about that because of your comments about wealth. You know, it could be seen that they're gathering money for what, and they're taxing us unnecessarily. But those taxes go to pay for a whole lot of things that we need in this country. So it is a difficult job to be in government. It's a difficult job to be in power. But I'm glad that my whole trust and my whole life is not resting on decisions that the government might make.
Yeah, 100%.
My faith is in God, and I look forward to the day of his return. And I'm pleased that, you know, I have a hope. And I think some people don't have hope. And so I guess our message today would be, there is a hope. You can have hope. Don't get, you know, anxiety's at its highest, mental health issues are at their highest, stress is at its highest. And I think some of that's got to do with this uncertainty that we live in and what's going on, and, you know, life pressures and cost of living and all of those things. Interest rates went up this last month. I look forward to my increased mortgage payments, but, you know, I think our message today is to pay attention really to what's going on around you. You do have agency. You know, you can make a difference. I think one of the reasons that people don't speak up or don't say anything because they think, oh, big deal. What if nobody's going to listen to me.
Yeah, well, but another thing is I don't think our government is making it any easier to speak up, especially these new laws that just came out after the Bondi shooting, saying if you hurt anyone's feelings, then you can be charged or you can go to jail. And what does that mean? Who decides that? Who decides the objectivity of someone's feelings getting hurt? What's offensive? What's not offensive? So
yes, we hope we haven't offended anybody in this podcast. For the couple of you that listen, we appreciate it. Certainly that's not our intention. But I do think that one of the challenges, and I understand why the government did what they did, I think we have a problem in our world of reacting rather than forward thinking around some of these pieces of legislation. Fun fact that I learned when I was in Canberra last year is that actually the government don't know how many pieces of legislation there are. There's no actual count. Nobody actually knows.
Oh, that's good.
So that's great confidence right there in the powers that be. So, you know, I think that they need to get their head around that, and we need to understand what we can say, what we can't say. I think, you know, in this political correct world that we live in, I think people become too scared to speak up. And people don't have the courage and confidence to speak up. And so where do they do that? They do it around their kitchen tables, at night, at dinner. You know, I do it when I'm catching up with people. We discuss kind of what's going on around the world. Less and less posting on social media because that's kind of being put down.
Yeah.
And so how do we speak up? You just want to encourage you, if you don't know who your local member of parliament is, look it up. I'm sure ChatGPT can answer that for you. If you've got concerns about what's happening in your local area, go and meet with your local member. You know, write a letter. Meet with your local council. Our bins weren't collected this week.
All right.
I know. What's going on there? Anyway, Better write to my local counsellor,
It's better.
find out the story. So, Joel, what is kind of your final message? Can we escape the matrix? Are we stuck?
Look, I think in terms of the matrix, I think we can break out of the matrix if I'm talking about financially. Like I said, I think the pressures, the tax, the cost of living, all these things may or may not be purposeful by leaders, may or may not be purposeful. So can we break out of it? Yes, but the only way to do so is through hard work and discipline. It's not going to be easy. And so I do encourage you not to just sit and cry and, oh, I'm going to have to work my 9 to 5 my whole life, because that's not true. You do have opportunity. You do have the willpower. Like, anyone can do it, I believe. I believe anyone can become successful. Anyone can break out of that stressful life of that 9 to 5 life. And I definitely think it is possible to break out of that. And in terms of the other side of things with corruption and that uncertainty, I would genuinely just encourage, again, to speak out, but I'd really encourage to get into the word, because it's hard to speak out now, because you see people speak out and they get persecuted for it. I think you get persecuted for saying the truth. And we can see this by the laws. We can see this by history of people who try and speak out. And so if I'm a non-believer, I would never speak out, because I don't have the certainty. But as a Christian, if I know the Holy Spirit lives within me, I know I have eternal life, I can speak out confidently. So I'd encourage everyone to get in their word, really, because that's the truth. That's what will give you hope. That's what will give you peace. And yes, you can break out of the matrix in terms of the pressures that they put on us with tax and whatnot. So that's what I encourage. Work hard, be disciplined, get in the gym, work on yourself, and get into the Bible and find the truth.
And I would say we're all unique. Every person has a unique skill and ability that they bring to this world. No two people are the same. Even twins have differences. My encouragement to everybody listening and watching today would be, understand your unique skill and ability and what you bring to this world, and bring it. Don't just be one of the hundreds that commute every day and do the day-to-day and so on. Know that wherever you go to work, bring your difference, be unique, bring your own leadership ability, and bring your voice. Do speak up with confidence and boldness, and have courage to do that. And that's something I've learned over the years, and I'm not afraid to do it. And you're right, I get persecuted and people don't like that I'm outspoken, but I'm not going to change doing that, because I've seen it benefit others. You've got to be coming from the right motivation, of course, as well. So I think, you can break out of the matrix, or you can choose to stay, blue pill, red pill. You can choose to stay in your little bubble and enjoy your life and just go to work and just pay your bills and do the stuff on Saturdays and all of that. If that's what you choose, then you do that. We're not judging either way. But if you feel like, something's wrong in this world, then I want to encourage everybody that you can make a difference. Every single person can make a difference. When it comes to elections and voting, every vote does count. And I've seen it, where, votes have come in. There was an election recently where somebody won by 19 votes. So every single vote does count. So, you do have a voice. You can speak up. You should speak up. If you are without hope, and if you are fearful of what you see going on around the world, please reach out and get help. Reach out through us, reach out through Lifeline. We have our faith in God and believe that He is our help ultimately. And so we have confidence to live our lives because of that. So I just encourage you to make a choice. Don't sit on the fence. Choose a side. If you're going to live in the bubble, by all means, live in the bubble and accept that you choose to live in the bubble. If you don't want to live in the bubble, take the blue pill or the red pill. I can't quite remember which one it was now. It's been a long time since I watched it. And come out of that matrix and speak up and count your voice. You know, we're speaking up today about this. We're not ashamed to speak out about it, not trying to be offensive, but just trying to let people know that we have a view and we don't always agree with each other or with what the government's doing or what others are doing around the world, and we're happy to speak up and shout about it.
I'll probably say one more thing off the back of that. Definitely don't think that you need to be insanely successful or higher up there to speak and have influence. I've seen it on.
You can be poor like us.
Yeah, sure. But I've seen it, especially through social media. People who are just consistently posting can have a great influence on a mass amount of people.
Yeah.
And all it takes is consistency, discipline, hard work, like I said. And I've seen a lot of young men just start posting on social media, being themselves, being authentic. I think authenticity is something that is very lacking in this world. People like authenticity, and you can make an influence. You definitely can, and you just have to start somewhere. So if you strongly believe that something is wrong, like you said, in this world, speak out about it. Don't be afraid to do it, and just stay consistent in it, and influence people for the better. And you can make a change in your own world as well, like you said, at work. And
And if you're wondering what to watch on TV tonight, I think it might be time to turn the Matrix on and just have a watch and just watch it with different eyes and consider what we've talked about today. So, it's been a good conversation. Thanks to Joel for sparking my own thoughts. I confess I had not thought about it in that term, and you've helped me think about it. And I think that's one of the advantages of having these kinds of conversations. We shouldn't be afraid to have these kinds of conversations.
So wake everyone up.
That's right. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to post in the comments. Please be nice about it. Happy for you to disagree with us, but, open to your thoughts and comments. And we'll catch you next time. 2 generations, 1 mic. Although there's actually 2 mics.
Oh, yeah. That's right. When you see someone, Andrew Tate, speak up against governments and try and shed light and wake people up and won't shut up, and they try and cancel you, and then, okay, now they're going to try and put you in prison, and then they don't go to prison, and the whole case gets thrown out, you start to think, okay, so maybe it's true. Maybe what he's saying isn't so far-fetched, because why would they go after him so much?
We are the highest taxed nation in the world, and somebody needs to do something about that because of your comments about wealth. It could be seen that they're gathering money for what? And they're taxing us unnecessarily. I think too many people sit on the sidelines just living their lives in their bubble.